Hello and good evening, everyone. Welcome to the CPPR webinar series organized by Center for Public Policy Research, Kochi. CPPR is a public policy think tank in Kochi, Kerala, engaging in a range of sectors like urban governance, mobility, education, livelihood, governance and law, security, and international relations. We have been a pivotal partner in furthering engagements with governments, diplomats of various nations. To know more about what we do, please do visit our website, www.cppr.in, and our social media accounts. For this webinar today, we are partnering with Samriddhi Foundation in Kathmandu. Today, we're going to dive into a very interesting topic, analyzing India-Nepal relations as a follow-up to the 2022 general elections in Nepal, which happened late last year. I'm Sharon Susan Koshi, Research Associate at Center for Public Policy Research. And today I will be in conversation with Mr. Satish Joshi, Mr. Srinivasan Ramani, and Dr. Pramod Jaiswal. Mr. Satish Joshi currently runs an organization named Drishti, a citizen initiative to advocate for clean air, dispel myths, and create awareness of the serious effects of pollution on health and the environment. Dr. Srinivasan Ramani is the Deputy National Editor of The Hindu. He works extensively on opinion pieces for The Hindu on topics such as India-Nepal relations, international political economy, and international sports. Dr. Pramod Jaiswal is the Research Director at Nepal Institute for International Cooperation and Engagement. He specializes in China and South Asia and has done extensive work on Chinese foreign policy, China's South Asia policy, and China's ambitious Belt and Road Initiative. Now, to get into a little bit of a brief about the topic today, as close neighbors, India and Nepal have fostered a unique friendship and collaborative relationship marked by open borders, deep-rooted people-to-people kinship, and extensive cultural linkages dating back to the 1950 Treaty of Peace and Friendship. Bilateral relationships forged via trade and investment, culture, defense, and energy cooperation have resulted in reciprocal national prosperity and regional advancement for decades. However, Nepal is sandwiched between the growing powers of India and China, where regional vulnerabilities and pro-Beijing regimes have resulted in an increase in territorial disputes and a decline in bilateral cooperation and collaboration. Pushpa Kamal Dahal Prachanda has become Prime Minister for the third time after leaving his previous coalition and gaining back of the Communist Unified Marxist-Leninist Party. Prachanda's government, with the backing of the preceding PM KP Sharma Oli, reaffirmed that Nepal is looking to maintain equi-proximity relationships with both India and China, with the nation intending to focus on containing inflation, maintaining research, and raising capital expenditure and lowering interest rates as part of its national agenda. However, there exists contradicting rhetoric as the KP Oli government continues to advocate for the recovery of national territory claimed by India, referencing the 2015 territorial disputes. KP Sharma Oli previously aimed to build ties with China as an alternative to Nepal's long-standing tight trading ties with India. Furthermore, under Oli, India's bilateral ties with Nepal were strained as India inaugurated an 80-kilometer-long strategically significant route connecting the Lipulekh Pass with Dharachola in Uttarakhand in 2020. From India's point of view, the continuation of the former Sher Bahadur Dwiva-led administration had been the optimum environment for developing bilateral prosperity and partnership, with a decline in China's looming influence. Within this context, the Nepali Congress had long had links with India, and under Dwiva's leadership, India-Nepal ties began to improve rapidly and significantly. With rising tensions in Nepal-India relations due to border disputes, China's growing regional influence, and the need to strengthen collaboration and cooperation, this webinar will investigate the future trajectory of the Indo-Nepal relationship, particularly in relation to Beijing's influence alongside economic and political ties. Now, to get into my first question, I would like to ask Dr. Pramod Jaiswal. In 2020, during the reign of PM Oli, ties between the two countries, India and Nepal, came under severe strain after Kathmandu published a new political map that showed three Indian territories of Limpiadhura, Kalapani, and Lipulekh as part of Nepal. Also, as opposed to Oli's way of dealing with the issue, Dwaiba said last year that diplomatic talks will only be helpful in reclaiming their land. So at present, how do you think this issue is going to escalate? Will we witness a steep slope downward in terms of the bilateral relationships?
Thank you, Sharon. Thank you so much for the invitation. Let me first make some correction in the question itself. You said that Kathmandu or Nepal published a new political map that showed three Indian territories, Limpiadhura, Kalapani, and Lipulekh. Actually, these three territories are not Indian territory. Nepal claims as it is Nepal's. So it's disputed. I mean, both India and Nepal has accepted that it's a disputed territory. So if you look at Indian map, India puts all the disputed territories in its territory. You put POK as as a part of Indian territory. You put all the disputed territories as Indian territory. So does Chinese do that. Nepal never did that. Nepal only used to have a map which has the territories that are not disputed. For the first time during KP Oli's time, Nepal published a map which put even the disputed territory that Nepal claims as Nepal's. So Limpiadhura, Kalapani, and Lipulekh was included. So it's not Indian territory, it's disputed territory, number one. Number two, for the first time, Nepal made such map. Before that, the map of Nepal, the previous map was not a single part was disputed. It was all Nepal's. So that was one change. Obviously, there was a politics behind it. We all know that the relations between India and Nepal during Oli's tenure was strained, and Oli wanted to feel nationalism or fuel anti-India feeling in Nepal, because Oli was not happy with the Indian regime at the time, because we all know that India had not supported Oli regime. So that was the major reason. Now, the question is, how can we deal with that now? I mean, obviously, like when the issue like these emerge, then it becomes very complicated to resolve that issue. So when we have cordial government, when both Nepal and India, or Delhi and Kathmandu has cordial relations, when both the government are in good talking term, maybe when these issues are not highly politicized, not very sensitive, both the parties should sit together and resolve it. I mean, Nepal and India enjoys the best of the relations. No country in this region has the relation that Nepal and India enjoys. And if there is a disputed territory between Nepal and India, imagine, I mean, what is the situation with others? So, I mean, first, there should not be disputed territory between Nepal and India, because both are friendly countries. We have very good relations. We have open border. We have historical links. So if there is a disputed territory for even the last 7 decades, itself is a question. I think both the parties should sit together and resolve it once and for all. Obviously, when the issues are highly politicized, it's complicated. But at the moment, when relations are cordial, it is good for both the sides to sit together, resolve it once and for all. So I think what is new is that at the moment, whether it's Deva government or the new Prachanda government, they're not going to politicize this issue. So the time is very conducive at the moment. So I think Prachanda would also not try to raise these issues and complicate the relations, because he wants to develop relations with India as well as with other countries. So in this situation, it will be beneficial for both the countries to sit together and resolve it once and for all. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Jaiswal. As a follow-up to this question, Srinivasan, may I ask you, this rhetoric by Oli, what do you think could be the geopolitical outcomes of this particular rhetoric, especially with China's rising influence? And I'm talking in the context of the reopening of Rasavagadi and Kirung border, as well as Pokhara Regional International Airport being built by China.
Yeah, before that, I would first want to say I largely agree with Pramod in the sense that there have been varying interpretations on these three three regions, and especially on the Kalapani issue with respect to the status of it. There have been variances between India and Nepal on it for quite some time. But it is important to note that there was a joint technical committee that was set up to clarify the boundary issue in the 1980s, and in 15 years they clarified literally 98 or 97% of all the boundaries, except for just two areas. That was the Kalapani area and the Susta area, that is in Terai. The committee was dissolved in 2008, and there were further discussions that were supposed to be held at the foreign secretary level to resolve them. And later, there was also talk of a border working group, which actually happened when Mr. Modi came to power in India. But that has also failed to take off. Now, the immediate trigger for the Nepali reaction, I would say, was there were two triggers. One was the inauguration of the 80-kilometer track, and the other was the release of the survey map by the Survey of India that actually showed the status of the river Kali as being on the Indian side. That actually triggered a protest from the Nepali side. And they actually wanted clarifications, but that was not forthcoming because there was a change in the ambassador and also the foreign secretary during that time, late 2019. And by that time, already the temperature in Kathmandu had risen up so much that the Nepal political leaders had to, who normally use this for political purposes, they immediately went on to pass a resolution in Parliament that endorsing the new map, which showed which added to 335 square kilometers of that area to Nepal's territory. So that's the background of this whole thing, right? So the way to sort it out is obviously going back to that mechanism where the two governments talked to each other and sorted out their boundary issues. But as of now, that even though things have normalized after Mr. Oli had to cede power in 2020, on the border issue, the Indian side is not willing to have any bilateral talk on this, while the Nepali side has been trying to, seek clarifications and so on. I think a conducive atmosphere will ultimately allow these two parties to go and have discussions over this. But importantly, when you pose the question whether there has been some kind of a territorial incursion, I don't agree, because India is already in control of that territory that is now claimed by Nepal. There's no question of incursion. But Nepal is also aware that you can't up the ante any further, because they also know this is close to the Tibet border, and therefore it is, and India is now currently having border issues with China, and therefore upping the ante on these issues will not, go down well. So, and most importantly, for all these issues, from the perspective of the Nepali people, I would say it changes nothing on the ground for Nepali people, because ultimately, because of open borders, there is movement of Nepali people from one country to another. So this is more of a rhetorical claim for territory by both sides, and therefore this can be actually hatched out if mechanisms are brought again to discuss this, as it happened in the past. Now, with respect to hello.
And how do you think China's influence is actually going to play out there?
I'll get to that now. So yes, we know that there has been a growing influence of China and its engagement with different political actors beyond what was there before. But previously, China's core issue vis-a-vis Nepal was how Tibet is being vis-a-vis what the regime in Nepal was doing vis-a-vis Tibet. That was his core concern. But now we notice that the Chinese embassy has been developing much more intricate relationship with various political actors in Nepal. Now, while that would worry someone who is fixated only on Indo-Nepal relations from a security point of view, I think that's a very narrow way of looking at it. So why I say so is the following, because in my opinion, the geopolitical nature of the India-Nepal relationship, right? Because we have interconnected plains, we have open borders, and we have a presence of a large demography of people in the Indo-Gangetic plain and the Himalayan plains, as opposed to the China-Nepal border, which is largely underpopulated, is characterized by difficult mountain hill plateau terrain. So that would mean that the relations between India and Nepal are on geopolitical terms are much more robust and people related than that between China and Nepal. Even if you notice, even if the Chinese regime engages in intricate relationships with the Nepali polity, it doesn't mean that the relative advantage that India has vis-a-vis Nepal is overcome. So we should therefore look at the border returns with Nepal, not from the perspective of what this could entail about Chinese influence, but on the basis of what we have managed to so far, peacefully and diplomatically resolve nearly 98% of the border between the two countries. So it is in the spirit of this long-standing initiative that India should refocus on talks with Nepalese government, irrespective of which regime is in power in the country.
Thank you. Thank you, Srinivasan. Now to Mr. Joshi. India-Nepal collaborations have seen a rise in energy trade and development, especially with the Arun 3 project, the Thalbekar-Muzaffarpur line and more. This provides Nepal access to reliable and secure electricity at minimal costs, where Nepal is looking to strengthen the local connection grid manufacture, especially with India. Now, hence, what do you think the role that Prachanda's government could play in enhancing India and Nepal's energy cooperation and power trade, even in the background of other geopolitical disputes?
Hi, thank you, Sindhuj. And I think, to really answer that question very directly and briefly is I would expect that our Prime Minister, Mr. Prachanda, would not rock the boat, so to speak, and continue the really positive trajectory that India-Nepal relations on energy cooperation has witnessed in the last 5 years. There is absolutely no doubt on either side of the border that energy cooperation is beneficial for both. I don't think I need to enumerate what they might be. And then, we expect the Arun 3 project to come online in the next 2 to 3 years. And even as that is expected, energy trade between Nepal and India has reached new heights. And my expectation and, judgment is that the new Prime Minister and the new regime will not do anything to rock that. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Joshi. Now, to further talk about what we share with Nepal, Mr. Jaiswal, what could be the direction that can be undertaken in the years to come in terms of resource sharing and management between Kathmandu and New Delhi?
Actually, I would like to focus more on water resource itself rather than other resources, because hydropower is one of the major resources for Nepal. Nepal has the capacity to produce 43,000 megawatt of electricity, and we have not even generated 10,000. And we all know that India, Nepal, and the whole region is deprived of clean energy. So water is a major resource. I think India should allow Chinese funding in Nepal, because at the moment is that India is not happy with increasing Chinese fund in hydropower. Initially, India said that they will not buy Chinese invested or Chinese funded hydropower projects from those projects. Secondly, they said that they will not even buy from those which are Chinese contractors. Now, if Nepal government want to produce electricity and then we bid, and after bidding, the lowest contract goes to Chinese generally. And we have to follow these procedures. We can't give it to the highest bidder, we have to give the lowest bidder. And if India is not willing to buy even those electricity, then there is an issue here in Nepal, because we can't go to the higher bidder and the lowest bidder is Chinese. So what will be the consumption of that excess electricity that we produce? So that is a major hurdle that India is not very happy with Chinese investment. Second, even the Chinese contract. And the reason behind is that India does not want increasing Chinese FDI in Nepal, because if Chinese invest in hydropower, it's a bigger project. So obviously it will, Chinese will be the largest contributor in Nepal's FDI. So that is the reason. But what is important is that the second part is that Nepal and Bangladesh also want to have power trade, but it is not possible without the help of India, because the electricity transfer line has to go through India. Even the shortest connectivity between Nepal and Bangladesh is through Chicken Neck, so it is very sensitive security-wise. So these issues has to be resolved. What I think is that first, India should harness Nepal's hydropower potential, because India can be a bigger market, and Nepal has Nepal want to give certain relaxation to India. So both the countries should work together. But if it is beyond that, if India is not interested, then we should allow third party, it can be China or others, to engage in this region. The reason is that hydropower is a clean energy, and this is the future, and we need it. India, Bangladesh, China, these are the largest polluter of the world. And Nepal's economy can flourish only through hydropower. We see huge potential for that. So I think on the issues of climate change, on the issues of something like clean energy, India and China should collaborate, even Nepal. And it's not they're not doing that. I mean, look at the way India and China are engaging themselves on clean energy. So if they are willing to have such a huge engagement at bilateral level, why there is a concern here at trilateral level? Obviously, if there are certain issues of China, India, we will be happy to address that. But I think this has to be resolved in order to harness our hydropower potentials to the optimum. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Jaiswal. Now, my next question is again in the context of China's relations with Nepal with regards to BRI. So a group of experts from China had arrived in Nepal to conduct a feasibility study, right, in Kathmandu-Kerong railway plan. And since Nepal is indeed a landlocked country, its connectivity is a bit of an issue. And this trans-Himalayan railway is calculated to be, a way out of it. But however, the concern in New Delhi is that it is going to be an expansion of Chinese influence as well. So how do you think this will impact India-Nepal relations? The question is to Srinivasan.
Yeah. So Sharon, Nepal being a sovereign country is well within its rights to choose whether or not to take part in China's Belt and Road initiative for better connectivity. Having said that, as a landlocked country that is entirely dependent upon India for access to the outside world, for trade, for commerce, via the seas, it makes sense for the regime to pursue alternative trade and transit routes. But the regime will also have to be very wary, right? It has to be wary of the financing and the debt-inducing ways of the BRI projects, which have, hewed many countries to be more dependent upon the Chinese for the long run. Besides, to be specific about the new railway project that has been envisaged from Kathmandu to Kerong specifically, the Chinese feasibility study will have to reckon with the fact that the areas that the railway network will have to traverse, right, will be difficult terrain. It will have low population density, and also because of the topography, the infrastructure project will be a complex and laborious one. I'll just quote from a Kathmandu Post report on this, which quoted a China First Survey and Design Institute pre-feasibility study of the railway. It found that the Kathmandu section is in a collision and splicing zone across the Eurasian plate, which presents major geological problems. It says that the fault effects of the deep active fractures are in high intensity seismic zones. It says that the cost of the the bridges and tunnels and construction would be rupees 3.55 billion per kilometer. And it also says that essentially it says that it has to be it will be high cost, and it has to be funded on the basis of loans from China, which means that the Nepalese side have to take a call on whether it will be cost effective to take such a huge loan on the project, right? That might not have great returns because of the terrain, the difficult topography, the feasibility, or even the usability. So on the other hand, look at it from India's point of view. So we also had rail and transit projects that have, a few of them have been completed. So I think we should expedite the other projects that are already been promised, especially the Raxol project. Besides, we have to work out more modalities for energy-based cooperation. That is the better way to, engage with Nepal rather than raising issues with potential ties they would have vis-a-vis China. I think by harping upon the fact that the projects that connect the southern areas of Nepal and the northern areas of India would allow for greater passenger connectivity, greater flight connectivity, and are therefore more feasible compared to something that connects northern Nepal and western China. And that gives us some kind of a relative advantage, and we should play on that advantage more rather than seeking to put pressure on the Nepali ruling class or the Nepali establishment from going ahead and having these kind of projects with China. That's my opinion.
Absolutely. I mean, there are still contestations on the fact whether we can really call China's way of financing debt trap, or whether it's a Western way of seeing it. I mean, we can go on debating about it, but
I'm not saying that it will be a debt trap, but it depends on the feasibility. Like Hambantota,
right.
Essentially resulted in into a white elephant, and Sri Lanka had to lease that port to China for 99 years. It all depends upon the feasibility, right? If building such an
if you can finance the debt.
Yes. So that's what I'm trying to say. I'm not saying that all projects are necessarily going to be
absolutely, yeah. Thank you, Srinivasan. Now, Mr. Joshi, a question on the trade relations between India and Nepal. Now, India's exports to Nepal had witnessed a 5-year high under Doiba's government in 2021 to 22 period, ranging between $6,000 million and $9,000 million. But at the same time, you can see a decline in exports under Oli's government as well. And currently, how do you think the power transition and the changing political currents in Kathmandu is going to affect the trade and investment sector and the bilateral trade between India and Nepal?
Yes, Sharon, I think it's important to first point out that, those are just two data points that do not necessarily imply or cause an effect, right? I think the issue has less to do with geopolitics than Nepal's own, economic structure. We're a very import-driven economy, largely financed by our remittance inflows. Having said that, I want to bring back the discussion to my area of expertise, which is energy. Energy-related imports accounted for more than 20 to 25% of that total import that we have with India. And the energy trade, which I spoke about earlier, when I say energy, the electricity trade that has, really taken off in the last couple of years, presents the possibility of actually reversing some of that deficit with India. And not only stemming the imports, but also potentially also having exports. Nepal is expected to be electricity self-sufficient year-round. I mean, we have seasonal imbalances right now, deficits in the dry and surpluses in the wet, but we expect to be net surplus throughout the year, in 3 to 4 years from now. And so the energy exports presents, a real opportunity for Nepal, and Dr. Jaiswal already spoke to the potential for that. And in terms of the regime, like I said earlier, I don't think there's going to be anything really drastic that will change that equation vis-a-vis trade with India. I think the economic trajectory, the growth in Nepal is what will drive how that equation changes or doesn't change. But from my perspective or from my vantage point, I don't see the change in regime actually having any meaningful impact on the trade relationships between Nepal and India. Srini talked about, our relationship with India is a special one. It transcends time, it transcends culture, and So I don't see any substantial change in the trade equation with India under the new regime.
Thank you, Mr. Joshi. Now, again, my next question is addressed to Dr. Jaiswal. Dr. Jaiswal, how do you think India and Nepal actually can look to the future to enhance collaboration on a multiple range of issues, right? We have talked about energy security here, trade, defense cooperation, and security in itself is something else to look at. So how do you think with the regime change in Kathmandu, India and Nepal and can work together to enhance the already existing bilateral relationships?
As we discussed, that energy cooperation is one, because Nepal has huge potential, and that is one sector which can transform Nepal's economy. It can be a backbone of Nepal's economic development. It can transform Nepal overnight. So that is one where both India and Nepal can work together. As I said, we have huge potential, and India can be a market because India really requires clean energy. It has the huge capacity to consume that. That is one. Second is defense cooperation. We all know that Nepal and India enjoys open border. Our security concerns overlap due to that. India is largest defense supplier to Nepal. We have Gorkha regiment serving in India. So the Chief of Army Staff of Nepal is honorary Chief of Army Staff of India and vice versa. So we have a strong defense cooperation between the two countries. And third, which is most important, is connectivity, which can impact the lives of people. 50 years ago, we were more connected. Nepal and India was more connected. There was railway service from Ayodhya to Janakpur, which has disappeared in recent times. But there are some progress made recently, like there is direct bus services started by Prime Minister Modi. Railway connectivity is coming up from Raxol to Kathmandu and east to west highway, along east to west highway. So these are good signs. Waterways are being explored. But what is most important is that if India and Nepal fail to meet these aspirations, because what is happening is there with the rise of China, rise of India, the aspiration of other small countries are also rising. With the rise of India, with development of rapid development of India and China, the aspiration of Nepalese, the aspirations of Bangladeshis or Sri Lankan is increasing. So if these neighbors, if India fail to meet the aspiration of Nepal, then obviously Nepal will go to seek for alternatives. Nepal has a huge desire to have connectivity projects because Nepal is least connected. In spite of being between two largest economies of the world, we are not getting, or the fastest growing economy of the world, we are not getting the benefit. The reason behind is that we are not between the fastest growing economy, India and China. We are between the two, the poorest part of both the economies. Nepal do not border with Delhi, Mumbai, Calcutta, or Madras. We border with poorest part of India, like poorest part of poorest state or least developed state. We border with poorest part of Bihar, not Patna or other big cities. We do not border with Lucknow or Kanpur. We border with the poorest part of Uttar Pradesh. We do not border with Calcutta. We border with the poorest part of West Bengal. So there are insulators. Similarly, on the Chinese side, there is similar thing. Like we border with the poorest part of Tibet. So we have to break that insulator. How can we break that insulator so that there is flow of development? That is by connectivity. So Nepal has a strong desire for connectivity project, whether with China, which is railway that Nepal wants with China, or similar with India. So if India do not meet those aspirations, then China is going to benefit. And it is not only Nepal, it's everywhere. Where are Chinese entering? Africa. None of the countries were interested in going to Africa, then China came into picture. So if India failed to meet those aspirations, obviously that would benefit the other countries. China can be one. Because we all know that the reason behind the rise of China or China getting all this space is because India at times has failed to meet the aspiration of its neighbors. So I think through connectivity, India and Nepal should expand their engagement, and development projects can be speed up. Postal highway is progressing. Maybe we can speed up furthermore. Railway projects can be furthered. So connectivity is one, defense cooperation, energy. I think these are three major areas where both the countries can work together and deepen our ties. Thank you.
I believe even tourism is some in another sector we can actually look
at.
Even in terms of,
if
Buddhist tourism, the circuits, it is a huge sector that both governments should actually pay attention to.
That's true. If there is connectivity, obviously tourism will explore. I mean, there'll be Buddhist circuit coming up, there'll be Hindu circuit coming up, tourism, pilgrim tourism, adventure tourism, all kinds of tourism will flourish, because we all know that Nepal is a beautiful country, and there is a rapid rise in middle class in India as well as in China. So if we have proper connectivity, and if we can get even 1% of the tourists from the total number of Indians that go on tourism, or even 1% of total tourists that are from China, if you can grab that, we can have a massive transformation, economic transformation in the country. So connectivity is going to bring, develop the tourism industry. It will open the scope for industrialization as well for the country.
Thank you, Dr. Jaiswal. And now the last question for today's webinar is addressed to Srinivasan. Now, this question is a little bit into what our future looks like in terms of, given the various risks that are obviously there. Now, Indian security and diplomatic officials have got information that China is set to push for reviving and expediting Beijing-backed projects, which were shelved by the Doiba government. If these projects get a green signal from the new dispensation, then China would be able to start expanding its influence in the Himalayan nation once again. Now, what measures can actually India do, again, like Dr. Jaiswal was saying, to match up the aspirations, or say not lose ground, or to put it mildly rather, how can we actually ensure that we do not lose out in staying connected with our neighbors?
Well, just as Dr. Jaiswal pointed out, connectivity is key, right? And all these promises that we have made and what we have done so far, we need to build on that. The one good thing that the Indian establishment has done vis-a-vis other international actors in Nepal is that, irrespective of who is there in the regime, the Indian establishment deals with the development agencies and also the bureaucratic agencies who are in charge of implementing projects, right? That's something I noticed during my thesis study as compared to other Western agencies, for example, how they deal with the Nepali establishment. So that assures to some extent that projects are completed. The one thing that's missing is whether the projects are completed on time, and we follow up on what we envisage for the project. For example, this recent railway line from Jayanagara, I forgot the exact name. That was recently, the railway authority in Nepal was complaining that they've extended the contract with Konkan Railway to maintain it, but they still don't have the funds to run it on their own, and they have asked for reducing the fee component to make the project feasible, and so that more passengers would use it. So we need to follow up and ensure that those projects become relevant over a period of time instead of just promising to do something or even delivering it, right? So that is something the Chinese do better. When it comes to building infrastructure, they have shown that they have been able to convert their excess capacity into and delivering on these projects far better, and which is the reason why many developing countries around us are also seeking to utilize the Chinese expertise in these matters. But as I said, it doesn't make immediate economic or feasible immediate sense for Nepal to embark upon high value projects on the Chinese side. Rather, utilize the unique geopolitical conjuncture that is there with India, and so that there is a win-win situation for both Indians and Nepalis. So using that, we have to basically utilize that relative advantage that we have, and make our project delivery more efficient, and follow on it on time. I think that's what we have to continue to do. And this would continue irrespective of who's in power in Nepal. On the other hand, for smoother implementation, we need to have better relationship with the regime, and that is possible by us not taking sides with one particular party or the other, but keeping a dialogue going on between various groups in Nepal, and that way our relations are on an even keel. What happens is that when we try to place sides there is an immediate reaction, which is an ultranationalist or a jingoist response, and that throws the cat among the pigeons and hurts a relationship, and which we should try to avoid. This is what happened during the so-called blockade in 2015, or the a period of tension in between 2008 to 2010. But the Indian external affairs establishment is aware of this, of the dangers of this impulse, and Indian establishment has corrected it whenever it's necessary. So all I'm saying is we need to continue that even keel relationship, and our relationship should not be always be driven from the bogey of China or from the security angle, rather than a public-minded angle, which looks at Nepal as a country which has very similar cultural characteristics as we do, and has its economic has certain economic issues, and is in a region where, as Dr. Jaiswal pointed out, suffers from poverty, suffers from inequalities, and suffers from lack of utilization of resources. And therefore, we have to look at it as a regional strategy, and not just a country-country relationship. And by building these projects and utilizing the resources in Nepal, and our financial muscle, and also our ability to provide and help in development projects, we can take this forward and help the people in this region. That should be the focus, rather than merely looking at it as a competitive a game that features India and China.
Thank you, Srinivasan. I guess that brings us to the end of the session. On that note, we thank you for the insightful discussion. For the past hour or so, we have discussed, and the discussion has so well captured, the state of affairs of relations between India and Nepal in the context of several geopolitical tensions. And also, we've gotten a feeling of how to take forward and sustain the relations, right, regardless of the regime change in either of the countries. It was an honor to host you this evening. Thank you all. Thank you all the participants for logging in and listening so intently. Please do not hesitate to send us your questions, which will be passed on to the speakers, and we look forward to getting more engagement from all of our dear listeners. At CPPR, we look forward to more such fruitful engagements with all through our webinars and podcasts. You can follow our website and social media pages for further updates. We will be back with another interesting webinar or podcast, especially in the South Asian context, shortly. With that, thank you, everybody. Good evening.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thanks.